I was very young when Street Fighter first came out, Street Fighter 2 in the arcades. But I would see my older brothers playing it, and I'm much younger than my brothers. I'm the youngest of 5 brothers. So 2 in particular, they would go out and play it. But I was too young to really interact with them. And then when it finally came out on console, that was like, all right, now I'm in there. I can finally start playing. But it didn't quite work out the way I wanted to. But from there, I always had this desire to go to the arcades and meet new people and play Street Fighter. And that's when I started meeting people who taught me different ways of approaching the game. I had my own unique way of approaching it, which was kind of not always the best. When you're a new player, you're learning new things. But I always had like a knack for seeing things that look cool and just doing the things that look cool and look fast. I was attracted to really, really kind of obscure characters. I played Yang in Third Strike initially. But my strategies were all bad, but I had really good reactions. So I had people that helped me direct it. And then once I was able to react to things, I started learning the psychology, and then I started developing my own sense of how frame data works and how can I apply this to the psychology and the reactionary qualities that I have. And then that's where I started playing. I got into the modern games, Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter Cross Tekken. I even played Marvel for a little bit. And now you kind of see the end result of all that research and history in Street Fighter 5, where I know how to dissect the frame data to a very, very to a number and make that a useful number.
So, yeah, that's something that I actually noticed about you in a lot of your videos is you do dissect it in a very specific way and you articulate it very well also, which is an important thing. It's very good for teaching.
I know that if I present something in a way that's too scientific, or if I present it in a way that's kind of boring, it might be the most meaningful thing in the world about Street Fighter. Like if I put together this crush counter setup that works here, nobody's going to care if I just do that and explain it. I have to show it in a way that's going to be like almost like meme worthy or like clickbait almost. I have to introduce that so that I can then introduce other like meaningful ideas. I know how the game works,
Yeah, it's very. So when you first said that, I kind of thought about Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's like a very popular scientist, and if you ever hear him talk, he speaks very visually, and he's great at introducing people to the layman's understanding of like astrophysics, but also like helping them understand how profound and deep something can actually be. So that's kind of what it sounds like you're doing, but in a Street Fighter level as well, because you have to cater to your audience.
As far as I know, Neil deGrasse Tyson isn't regarded. I mean, I'm sure he's an amazing thinker, scientist, but in the scientific community, he's not like the Justin Wong, but he's a great spokesperson. He knows how to present the information that's there.
So my other question then I have to ask is how did this all turn into like competing at some point?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. So what facilitated that whole where are the tournaments idea was Shoryuken. They had the forum, and you would see on the forum where people like now you see like Facebook or kind of word of mouth, and it's a lot of majors. And I think it is more challenging to get initiated into your local scene. But back then we had SRK. If you knew what SRK was, you could have a sense of where tournaments were in your area. Now Facebook is like you have to invite somebody, you got to know somebody, that kind of thing. I think it's harder to recruit new people, but that's how it kind of started. But my problem was I didn't have a license until I was 21-ish, if I remember correctly. I didn't have a license, so it was very tough for me to even get to arcades. But once I got my foot in the door and I started meeting people through the forum, I messaged somebody, and then he didn't get it until months later. But he didn't feel like he had to go out of his way, but he did feel kind of bad, that kind of thing. So that ended up being, one of my best friends, and he started taking me to tournaments on his own time. He's like in his 40s right now. He's a good role model. He has his own house, his daughter's going to college, that kind of thing. I mean, technically he's my uncle right now. He's actually my step uncle. That's how I met my wife.
Oh, wow, interesting. Very cool. So, I mean, this is I guess a more so personal question, but how have you found a way to balance like personal and like training for fighting games? Because it's something that, people who compete take very seriously.
Maybe I haven't. I think it's just been more the duration. I'm not 20. I'm not 18. I'm 30. I've been doing it since I was like 16 or so. So if you just consider me doing this for like maybe even 30 to an hour of a day, it's still going to be a lot more than somebody else who hasn't been doing it for more hours per day, but less time that I've been alive and doing this. But it's also the people that I've been introduced to. So the quality of hours. So if I put in an hour, but I know what I'm really looking for, I'm applying it in a very quick. So a lot of people are impressed that I play Zeku in 1 month. They're like, how are you, how are you already on this level and developed it and playing it at this at the speed. It's because I've done it so many times. I've seen so many different styles of play. I'm well traveled. I've been to many Evos, that kind of thing. I've been there and done that kind of. I mean, I don't want to like sound egotistical or nothing, but I have a lot of experience in this area. So it's kind of the premise here.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm glad you touched on that because that's something that I wanted to get to later on. But yeah, so obviously we both started playing Zeku at the same time. My level of skill is a lot lower than yours. So it's not like if we put in the same amount of time, we put in 40 hours a week of Zeku training, my outcome is not going to be the same as yours because your experience, your prior experience with fighting games as a whole is more extensive than mine. So I guess my question is, how do you kind of
condense the training hours?
Yeah. How can, because you asked this question, or someone asked you this question in a different way before in one of your videos, but in your words, how would you answer that?
Look for people that know what they look for their answers. It's like if you have a problem, you don't know the solution to it, but somebody else has solved it already. You can go. There's benefits to solving yourself. Absolutely. Part of the reason why I'm able to do what I do is because I've solved a lot of problems on my own. I've found the solutions and I've made some creative choices and here I am. Because I play characters like Hugo in Third Strike, Yang, Gen in Vanilla's Street Fighter 4. Because I went through the motions and followed my own path. Now I can play any character at will and find them out quickly. And even characters who are already established, I'll find things for them that. So you would want to see something. That other you want to see how the formula, you want to find the formula, the winning formula, and then see how you can use that. So I don't know, it's really hard to like condense that answer into one thing without really. So like the things that I look for in a new character, I would look for how to throw them, how to play mid-range, and how to play neutral. Those are the three things that I would look for initially, because that gives me the baseline, the guide of how this character is going to behave and how it interacts with other characters. So once I can establish that, then I'll look for knockdown, okizemi, then I'll look for defense, that kind of thing. But I already know enough about Street Fighter V to understand like the character matchups. So something that people struggle with is that they don't know enough about their character and the character they're playing against. So if you can't put those two things together, then you don't even have a starting point. You don't know where to start. So you have to take notes and see how other people are approaching it, and then you can use that as a starting point. And then you have to really identify what the problems are in the first place. But the other problem with that is that a lot of people don't know how to solve that problem. They don't know how to get from one thing to another. And it's the identification of that problem and then the solution. This whole A to B thing gets so far lost in translation. And I think a lot of unfair assessments are made from that position, but sometimes they are haphazardly accurate. So what I mean is the classic, I talked about this on Twitter the other day, how the perception of Cross Tekken and now Street Fighter V, the louder voices are reflective of the direct experience they have of the game, whether they're right or wrong. So a lot of people said Cross Tekken was sort of jab into chain combo and then timeouts, there's no damage. Totally wrong. There were a few characters who could get away with that, but because the game was so underdeveloped and a lot of people didn't know how to play it, they had no idea how volatile that game is dangerous. You ever play Cool Kid? You ever play Ryan Hunter? Rio, they hit you 2 to 3 times. Your character dies. You have one life bar. You have to manage it. That was kind of the interesting, like the delicate processes of that game. But if you didn't know how to do that, then sure, the game looks like it doesn't look like a good game. I mean, it visually doesn't look that great either. But the gameplay itself is hard to appreciate. So in comparison to Street Fighter V, a lot of people have this feeling of it's a lot of mashing. It's a lot of guessing. It's the neutral. It's crazy. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. But they still don't know the solutions to it. But they don't know how to figure that out either. So what are we supposed to do? Is it our responsibility? Is it someone like me? That's what I'm attempting to do. I'm trying to educate and inform as best as I possibly can. But I have to be honest about what's really there too.
I think a lot in analogies and metaphors. And the way I kind of want to like explain how I got that was basically I love martial arts. I think martial arts and fighting games go great together as analogies. And so when you practice martial arts, you can't just learn the advanced techniques or learn certain things. Like you can try them, but you won't understand certain things about them, or you just want to have the proper execution because you didn't build that foundation with, like, for example, with normals and the spacing, understanding the range of your normals and stuff like that. It's great to learn a combo, but if you can't use it in the optimal position, then you only know the combo in a static state. Whereas
you have the information, but not the technique or the execution part of it.
Right, exactly. And it seems like, I'm not a great player, so I see myself making this mistake, which is why I'm pointing it out. But I see a lot of other players that are better than me also having that same kind of mindset. They learn the game a lot faster than me, but they get these limits to where they are because they're not focused. They're not prioritizing certain things because it's a little more boring, not as flashy, but it's still very fundamental to fighting games. So let me know what you think about that.
A player might be weak in a certain area that they don't know how to improve on, so they try to accentuate the qualities that they do know about. I do think that a lot of people try to cheat their way into, not really cheat their way, like it's exactly what you should do, is that take notes and copy what other people do, but that's where it ends. They have that strategy, but they don't know all the moving parts involved with it. So I don't know really how to tackle that, because there's a lot of time invested into learning those certain abilities, but you have to identify them in the first place. You have to know, when to turn the switch on and off. And in Street Fighter V particularly, you have to know how to play a little bit crazy, but you have to know how to balance it too. With I like to say, it's like 20% you got to play solid, and 80% you have to be like presenting the threat or playing crazy. It's hard to answer that question without looking at it in a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Are we talking about neutral? Are we talking about anti-airs? Are we talking about knockdowns? Are we talking about how all those things interact with each other, how they happen as a result from one another, and how they happen in the first place? A lot of times in neutral, this is not to say that it's not possible to play intelligent neutral in Street Fighter V, but a lot of times it happens accidentally, and then you get straight to the guessing part, and then that's where it's kind of unpleasant. It's an unpleasant experience for me personally. It's not fun to win that way, or it's definitely not fun to lose that way either. But if you don't understand, if you can't pinpoint the cause of how you got to that position in the first place, then you can't only analyze the guessing part. I think you do have to accept you absolutely have to accept in many situations that it boils down to a guess in Street Fighter V. But there's a process before that even happens, and you have to identify what's going on in both players' mind.
So, in your opinion, what would be some of the factors that would affect somebody's ability to actually distinguish what they did wrong or right in a situation? Like, there's no absolute. There's no absolute. But some of the factors that you think you've noticed, what would you recommend? There
are some absolutes. So let's say somebody jumps in on you. You got Nikali. He does between a jumping hard punch and a dive kick. But you're so busy looking at the footsie. You're looking for his roundhouse on the ground. You're looking for him to do, I don't know, something like dash up, jab, throw, that kind of thing. You're paying attention to the ground. Now, you didn't anti-air him. That would be the absolute. You didn't anti-air him. But the reason why is because you're looking for other things on the ground. If you go into training mode and you have a character jump at you and you anti-air them, you can do it. I mean, you could probably do it a larger percentage than you could if you were multitasking. That's the biggest issue, is multitasking and knowing when to switch priorities, and then knowing when you need to force your opponent to multitask more than you. So this game really presses your ability to pressure your opponent mentally in ways that sometimes are accidental. That's a fancy way of me saying people play like cavemen, right? The unga bunga, and the Kali's notorious for this. They just jump at you. They just dash at you. They do roundhouse and crush counters. They do a V. This happened to me the other day. V skill, I blocked it. Sweep, crush countered me. I'm like, you kidding me? Really? So you have to really figure out what's going on there. It's not always a pleasant experience because of the feeling it gives you. You don't want to respect it. You don't want to actually say that I have to. He's gonna do an unsafe sweep here. You know what I'm saying? But you have to. It's always a case by case thing.
I would like to hear your explanation of a couple of things. Like you said, there was 3 things that are really important, and you listed them again. But your video understanding with punishing in Street Fighter V, that was a really good video, and I think you talked about a lot of different things in this, and you talked about proactive and reactive whiff punishing, or proactive zoning, and I'd like you to break down what that means a little bit more.
Okay, so reactive whiff punishing. As far as myself, I'm going to tell you how I tested this too. Within about 17 frames, if I take the total frames of a move, if I have a move that's 30 total frames, that's startup, active, and the recovery, And then I have another move that has whatever 30 minus 17, 23. No, excuse me, 13. If I have something that has 13 startup and I see something that's 30 total active frames, I can in the best possible situation. This is very important that I say that. This is the absolute best that I can do approximately. I can whiff punish. I can. It's important to establish that I can. What this test was really for was seeing what I could not whiff punish. So if I have a 13 frame move and their total frame is 25, there is such a low chance that I can't whiff punish it. So I have to be proactive about it. So what that means is that I have to use something before I see something actually happening. I have to use that slower button in anticipation of them doing that move, whether I want to counter hit them or hit them on the recovery. Now, the problem with this is that I have the potential for being whiff punished myself. Say that move that I'm trying to use, that's 13 frames total startup, is a 40 frame total active frame move that I have to use proactively if I aim to whiff punish something. If this move is 40 active frames that I'm using to proactively whiff punish, but my proactively whiff punish, the move that I'm using proactively to whiff punish something, not on reaction, can be whiff punished on reaction. So now I'm leaving myself vulnerable with something that I have to use. But if the reward is right, then it can be a little bit balanced. But that's part of the problem, is that now if I use something like Urian Standing Hard Punch, and then they jump at me, I'm in a recovery state, and now they might get a jump in, or I can't block it at least. And that to me seems like the goal for their design philosophy in Street Fighter V. Is have moves that have a lot of recovery, but they can crush counter. They might jump at you, but it doesn't always work out like that. It always feels more like everything is proactive. I think on paper, most things are proactive rather than reactive.
So would you say this falls into the other category of what you're talking about with unintentional neutral?
Unconfirmed neutral is a better way of saying it, because it's a combination of both. You are not able to verify what's actually happening, but you have to be in this mental predictive state to really make an intelligent choice. And sometimes the Occam's razor, like do not multiply entities, like what I'm doing right now. This is 30 frames. I can punish it at 17 frames. He might jump in at the same time, but I'll have 4 frames left, and that's probably not something. Well, I think it's important to know that. But oftentimes, especially playing this game online, just know about it, but playing off feel is better, but I think having the information first is good to know what you can feel based off of.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like, know it's there. Know that you can do this in certain instances, just not in all instances. Just have it in your mind. And so when that event happens that you can actually do something about it, then you can do it.
Yeah, you want to do the best possible, the most work you can possibly do to explain something so you can come up with solutions. And to come up with that solution, you have to understand what the answers are in the first place. So playing by feel is very powerful, but if you don't know, you need to have something that guides the way you feel. Sometimes it's just purely results. Just when you test something, it works out very well. That works out. But then when somebody else knows the solution to that, then you have to improve. And that's why I do think this game is a good tool for teaching people how to play fighting games, how to approach the learning mentality for fighting games. It's not overwhelming. It does have a lot of easy. It's accessible, right? It's very easy to play. But it's not easy to play for a lot of new players. They have no idea. You know what? I don't mean to ramble on about this, but when you play a first-person shooter, it's clear to you. You got to shoot things. You shoot them in the head, it does more damage. Get behind something. These concepts are pretty clear. Not saying everybody, you get the whole journalist mode meme these days. But in fighting games, in Street Fighter, the first thing people do, mash every button on the stick. They don't know. They don't have any direction. They don't understand those 3 things that I'm trying to and that's not a perfect list. I still maybe someday I'll work it out to where it's more comprehensive. But learning how to play neutral, anti-air, and how to just basically knock your opponent down and then mix them up when you're close to them, that gets so far from anybody who's first picking up a fighting game. It's hard to put those pieces together.
It makes me think about the idea of mental fatigue. I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this, but basically, as you go throughout your day, the more choices that you make, the lower your willpower. So think of a meter in an RPG or something like that. There's this literal concept where your willpower is a muscle. The more choices, okay, cool. The more choices you make, the lower it goes. And so with Street Fighter, it's a very overwhelming thing. So one, as you wean off of button mashing, you're learning there's more options. But as you learn there's more options, you're getting overwhelmed by the number of options. Yeah, but not and not being able to make the proper choices in any given situation. It's very overwhelming because you get to the state where you know there's a better way to get better, but you just don't know how to like go that route. So, and this kind of leads into my question of, I wouldn't call it multitasking, but you know, it's like chess. You have to think about so many different things at one given time. How do you lower that amount of energy that you have towards these things rather than getting overwhelmed by them? Or what has been your experience when you got past that overwhelmed sense of state and you're able to actually make proper choices?
The easiest answer that comes to mind is I think about when I learned how to play piano. Like you mentioned earlier, I do make music. I played cello in high school. I taught myself how to play piano. I make music, that kind of thing. But I didn't start playing piano with both of my hands. That wasn't the first thing I did. I didn't see a piece of music. I was like, oh, I can do this. I had to, I already had like the rhythmic qualities, following a tempo, that kind of thing from playing in my middle school, high school orchestra. So then when I understood how to apply certain how to read music, then I could start applying that and based off of what I heard, because I could still play by ear, but I combined that with the sight reading. And then I did one thing for the other. I put those together, and now I can work both of my hands together. But I'm still not quite playing music yet. It's not until you get comfortable with doing those things that you can actually make it expressive, and that's what you're really aiming for in fighting games, is that expressive nature. So if you don't know if you don't have the tools established, if you don't know how to learn about them to compare them to having like a piece of classical music, if you don't see, because the classical, if you're studying Chopin, Bach, Beethoven, they know what they're doing already, but they have the formula written down. So you can assess what they have written down, and then you can hear the result of it. But that doesn't ingrain you with the understanding of how they put that together. But it gives you the skills to perform it. So what I am trying to, my end game is to get people to compose music. I guess if we're using an analogy, which of course is going to be flawed, but it's hard to get that across though, because there's not really there's not any sheet music for fighting games. Well, there is, but it's hard to find. It's not in a good format, and it's not for like modern times, that kind of thing. It's just difficult to find, and there's not a lot of people who can present it.
I think that's a great analogy, which kind of bleeds into Zeku a little bit, because this guy, not only do you have to learn this new character, but he essentially has two different movesets. He's two different characters, but they kind of work in unison. They kind of, in my opinion, they're strongest when they're working together. But I'd love to know how your experience with learning this character that has two different forms. You've played Gin, so this isn't super new to you.
Like, I just feel like it's one character as a whole. It doesn't feel like there's such a weird approach for some people. It's like, I'm a young Zeku player. I only play old, or only do this in this matchup. It's like, why? It seems like such a how do you say, like a lore kind of thing. Like you're playing because of based off of what you feel is right or something. Or I relate more to the young Zeku, that kind of thing. That's not how I see things. I see it more. I try to be as objective as possible. Right. And just look at the math, look at the things, look at the tools I have available. How do I apply them? What problems do I have? Can I fix them? The same old thing. How do I throw them? How do I anti-air? How do I play neutral? Those are the first questions I have. And then with Street Fighter V in particular, what really defines a character and what their goal is at the end of the day, once you have all those things put together, the same three things. How do you do their V-trigger? How do you work their V-trigger mechanics? So Zeku does have a 2-bar V-trigger, so that means that he can build it at about 50% of his health-ish. So if you get a crush counter, you get some white health damage that you recover. You get the V-skill, which he is quite good at getting his V-skill. So that gives him another, I think it's like 20%-ish for 1 bar. So 10% you can get a V-skill. 10%, it'll give you about 10% if you land a V-skill, depending on the scaling. So he's good at building his V-trigger. And his V-trigger is really good. It has many uses. There's many things you can do about it, do with it. You have three things you can do with his V-trigger. As far as the mechanics itself, you have the activation. The activation itself is really good. If you do standing medium kick, and then you do medium, and then you go into Idante the dash, and you go to the target combo, you're not using it as best as you possibly could, unless that's going to kill them. Then you might squeeze out more damage. But if you do something like old Zeku, standing medium kick, activate, standing or crouching hard punch, medium kick techie, you've only used the activation and you've done comparable amount of damage that you would have if you used the remaining parts of the V trigger. But what you've done is you saved the Idante. Now you have that for later. Now you've added more utility to your normals. You have the slide V trigger available, or the slide Idante available with young Zeku, which can make your knockdown safe. You don't have to activate it if they block or if they get hit by it. If they block it, you can go into it and do the Idante string. So finding out the ins and outs of the character. And then the end game is, how do I use their V trigger? But then it's like, how do I get to where I can activate it and make the best use out of my V trigger? So that's really the approach to it. The rest of it is just, it's like simplifying each part individually. Because in Street Fighter V, I will say they have done a pretty good job of making everything have a use. Everything have some kind of quality where it's useful somewhere. So you look at Light Punch Horizontal. What do I use this for? Okay, maybe I can use this in anti-airing. Okay, it's got upper body invincibility. So to me, that implies maybe that's where the move ends. Maybe that's where I use it. Then I find somewhere else that I can kind of squeeze it in. If I get a crush counter, I do standing short, Light Punch Horizontal, and then I V-skill. I do less damage than a different combo, but if that V-skill is going to give me my V-trigger, then I have access to activation, and then I can start building it again in later parts of the match. So it's like dissecting each move and each part. You can get different answers for each thing, and it's like optimizing as much as you possibly can. That's what's really going to make this character. I already think he's powerful, and I'm like not even near optimized with him.
So, well, let me ask you this then: with the fact that he has these two different forms, the transition between the two, how I've seen you do certain things that I learned, like the heavy punch into the transform from old to young Zeku, stuff like that I didn't know was even a thing. Like, how do you go about learning how they work in tandem?
How do I think I need to talk about discovery too, if I do talk about that. So that is a result of looking at something like standing hard punch. If I'm just looking at his normals, I do standing hard punch, and then I do something like Bushin flip, or like I'm trying to assess, can I do any normals into the Bushin flip where it's worthwhile? So I'm looking at standing hard punch, and I notice how much block stun it generates, how much hit stun it generates, and that's where you get an idea. What if I cancel that into the stance change? What's the result? Is there any position, are there any normals in any form, young or old, that I can cancel and have advantage after I stance change? And the answer was standing hard punch. So how much advantage do I have? I have +1. So that means as young Zeku, my 3-frame normals are the fastest in the game. If they do a 3-frame and I do a 3-frame while I'm +1, I'm going to counter hit them. And then I can get crouching medium punch that combos off the counter hit. So just having that ability to hit crouching jab and counter hit them can convince my opponent to not do anything during that state. So now I can do things like walk up throw, walk up standing medium punch. So taking that small tool, that small observation, and turning it into something useful because of other things that I know about the game, that is absolutely essential to developing a character and finding out new things with them.
Did you look at the frame data when you did it, or did you just go through all the buttons and just try to stance change? I
didn't have the frame data at the time. Sometimes people tell me that's there too. I get stream chat, they help me out because they're doing research themselves, and then I can take an idea and then find something else and improve on it, or they can the information's out there. But we didn't have any of the frame data for a few days. So a lot of the discovery was it's so important to just go into training mode, have something programmed to have a 3-frame reversal on wake up when they're blocking, and then you can start to figure out your frame traps. That's really the key to it. The frame data just expedites that process, and it gives you more ideas.
What would be your canned answer for someone that comes up to you and is trying to get better, with any character? You just want to give them a process. You don't your elevator pitch for getting better at Street Fighter V or any fighting game that you're knowledgeable in?
My canned response is not informative enough, but I'm going to say it. It's what I told my best friend back in the Third Strike days. Two ideas here. And maybe this isn't as true as it used to be, but the amount of time that you spend blocking is directly proportional to the amount you learn about the fighting game. Now, this is like it's a little bit harder to tackle that question in Street Fighter V because blocking is always, it's a good thing to do, but the idea is that paying attention to what your opponent is doing is really a big part of how you should behave in the game. So it's just the simplest thing, like in Super Turbo. Somebody throws a fireball, you block it, they throw a fireball, you jump over it, you punish them. They don't throw a fireball, they jump at you, that person anti-airs you. So can you tell if they're throwing a fireball or not? That's the point. But that interaction between that fireball and anti-air, that to me, we got this whole what's real Street Fighter. That thought process to me, somewhere in that is what real Street Fighter is to me. So the long and short, pay attention. Pay attention to what's happening.
So you talked about streaming a little bit and getting answers from that. What's been your experience with streaming with people in the community and learning as a community?
I want to be like overwhelmingly positive. That's kind of a cliche answer, but it has been great, man. I'm trying to do it as a career now. I'm putting school on hold, and I'm spending the next couple months. I go to school for free now. I have the GI Bill. I'm former Air Force 6 years, so I'm finishing up my degree, and I'm like, I got to strike while the iron's hot, and everything is going really well. I'm almost at the point where I can pay for my bills playing just streaming in YouTube. So, and then I'm working on more projects. And I think I can do it as a career. So yeah, that should give you enough to respond to how well I feel like I'm doing.
Nice. I greatly respect everything you just said. That leads into my next question is where can they find you if they want to check out more of your stuff? Tons of great tutorials, guys. So check this guy's videos out. Go on YouTube. But if you're on social media, your Twitch, where can they find you?
You can find me on twitch.tv/automattock, twitter.com/automattock, youtube.com/Jibbo, Jibbo. I got to give you the mainstream, the on-camera person.
All right, yeah, I like it. There will definitely be links down below. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I hope you guys have too. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one.
Later.